Hey, in this video, I want to show you how I built this custom organizer tray to fit all of my printmaking supplies. I'm Jack Moranitz. I'm an artist and engineer with a passion for design. I love to share my projects with you guys, and I really hope that you enjoy this one too. If you happened to catch my last video, you may have seen the large shelves that I built to store all of my art supplies. Now, I happen to have a little bit of extra plywood from that project, so I decided to put it to use. For this one, I wanted to make something that was portable, something I could carry my printmaking supplies around so that when I wanted to do some printing in a different room, I could easily take it all to that place. So to start, I laid out all the different tools that I need for printing. I organized these on an extra piece of plywood that I had. I roughed out the dimensions that I felt were appropriate for this. Then I thought about how they could all fit together and what size of a pocket I would need for each tool. Now, once I had all the tools laid out the way I wanted, I jumped into CAD and started doing some more detailed design. This would allow me to make some instructions so that once I actually got into the shop, I could make some efficient use of my time. Now, this is typically part of my process, and if you have any interest in how to work with CAD, please leave a comment in the description because I've thought about making some videos for this. Anyway, once I was finished with that design, I went ahead and wrote down all the different pieces that I would need for this. Now, in the last video, I made a very detailed drawing for all the pieces, but this time I just decided to write them down because it's a bit simpler of a project. Next, I took all my wood into the shop and brought that list with me so I could make all the cuts I needed. Again, I cut everything down to size first. This time I had a few more features to add before I got into the assembly of this tray. One of those was the handles. For this one, I wanted to make sure it was very portable, so I accounted for that by adding some holes on the side of the tray. To do this, I simply copied the design from CAD onto my wood using a pencil and a ruler. Then I took it over to the mill and removed all the wood that I'd marked in that area. Now, I know there's better tools for this, but I just used what I'm comfortable with and it seemed to work out fine. However, I would love to hear your feedback and please let me know what you would have done in this situation. I also ended up using the mill to add a smaller recess for a nameplate. I wanted to add this detail to give this project a little bit more flair. Once I finished the nameplate, all of the different components were ready for assembly. However, first I decided to sand them all down nicely because I knew it would be a little bit difficult to sand once it's fully assembled. Just like the last process, I am using wooden dowels for this project. So I ended up making some simple jigs with the offcuts from these pieces. My first focus was to assemble and glue up the entire outer structure of this tray, and then I would focus on those dividers later. Luckily, I was able to use a lot of clamps for this step, which made the process a lot easier than it would have been. While the main structure was drying, I did some work on the nameplate. To start, I added my logo and a project name to the design, and I took some plywood to the laser cutter. Now, it took me a couple tries to dial in the settings for the cut and engraving, and you'll see this a little bit later in this video. Some of those looked better than others. With those nameplates out of the way, I shifted my focus back to the assembly. The main structure is now ready, and I started to focus on the dividers. Now, for the dividers, I took a kind of unique approach. I decided to fabricate the entire divider assembly separately from the box itself. The reason for this was that in the future, if I ever want to reorganize the tray or maybe just design it into something different, I would be able to remove this entire section pretty easily. So I used glue and dowels to join all the dividers themselves, and then once I assembled them into the box, I simply used some dowels from the outside. This means that I could remove those dowels in the future and take the entire divider assembly out. The main downside to this approach was that I had to do a lot of stages of gluing, and it took some extra time to build up those dividers. If I had done it in a different way, I might have been able to glue everything down in one go. Once those dividers were locked into place, I focused my attention back to the nameplate. As I mentioned earlier, I made a couple of these with different laser cut settings. Some of those got pretty burnt and honestly messed up, and for some reason I decided that I liked the look of the grungy, burnt plate. So to start, I glued that one down and quickly decided it looks terrible, so I popped it out and replaced it with one of the nicer ones. With that, the full assembly was complete. I did some final sanding touches, cleaned up the shop, and took it home to see how everything fit. Now, because I wanted this tray to fit on top of the furniture that I built last week, I wanted to make sure it wouldn't scratch up the surface. So first, I added some felt feet that I bought off of Amazon to the bottom. Filling up the organizer for the first time was super rewarding, seeing how everything that I laid out the day before fit perfectly inside its compartment. Plus, overall, I think it looks pretty nice in its place in the studio, and I'm excited to get use out of it in the future. Before I wrap up, for those interested, I'll show you what's actually stored in this tray. You can see it's pretty large, and part of that's that I only had 3/4 inch ply, but starting from down here, I actually store my carving tools, which come in this nice little canvas wrap. And then I also stored my camellia oil and nail polish, which I use for printmaking. I have my printmaking brushes here, all my different barons, including the chameleon baron, which is the topic of another one of my video series. I also have my pigments, which I use for printmaking as well, and pigment dishes. I have sumi and nori, which are an ingredient for printmaking as well. And then I keep my smaller brushes, which are used for kind of dosing the pigments in this small compartment here. So I intend myself using this in the future whenever I'm printing. I can kind of move this around the house to wherever I am. And kind of same goes for carving. I might end up changing some of the compartments or maybe modifying how I use it, but we'll see. I think the exciting thing is that I now have all of this hobby stored nicely in the corner of my room, and I think it looks pretty nice. Anyway, I think that wraps up what I wanted to cover in this video. Please let me know if you enjoyed it, and I'd also love feedback on what kind of things you want to see more of, or if you have any video ideas for me to cover. Like I said, I've had some ideas for videos, and I'd also love to hear what you guys would like to see. So please let me know, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Cheers.